Fall with more. We're now joined by Stephen Chase, senior parliamentary reporter with the Globe and Mail, who has been breaking many of the stories that we have seen regarding China interference. Stephen, thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, glad to be here.
So, you know, I got to start here with the elephant in the room, because here we have Alexandre Trudeau going before the Ethics Committee, and one of his opening salvos has to do with the Globe and Mail, pushing back on your reporting, the reporting with your paper, saying that it relies on a single source, and he says the facts are not true.
Well, he came loaded for bear to committee today. He went after us. He went after the CEO who ran the foundation for 4.5 years. He went after the Montreal press. I think the best way to deal with this would probably be a public inquiry, right? A public inquiry would get all this out in the open and they could hash through it all. So certainly there's lots of questions left to be answered, and that's probably the best way to deal with it.
Yeah, well, certainly a public inquiry is something that we have heard time and time and time again. And at this point, we're waiting for Mr. Johnston to essentially make a conclusion as to how this goes forward. But you mentioned Pascale Fournier, the past CEO of the Trudeau Foundation. And we did hear from her last week before this committee. And she essentially said that she left because she was getting pushback on an independent inquiry into this donation. Now, let's pick up on that point, because as you said, Alexandre Trudeau pushed back on that. I'm wondering how well he did that, and whether or not, after hearing from him, this is nothing more than a she said, he said regarding the donation.
I still think there's a lot he would have to rebut and would have to answer in order to really effectively push back. I mean, Ms. Fournier ran the place for 4.5 years, and she was actually given a 2-year extension of her contract that would have taken her all the way to 2025. So this was not a woman that the foundation had a problem with. In fact, until now, they thought she did a good job. But we have Mr. Trudeau the Younger, come to the committee today and say that this is all her fault. So no, I don't think he really made that case properly. She describes a situation where she became increasingly concerned about the source and reasons for this donation from the Chinese benefactors, and the board wouldn't let her conduct an independent probe. When we asked, you know, the foundation for comment on this, they've never said a word to us. They've never replied. And now Mr. Trudeau is trying to essentially character assassinate Ms. Fournier. But I think he has to provide more evidence.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, the concern for the opposition is when it comes to this donation, again, given by 2 Chinese businessmen with now ties, as revealed in reporting, with the People's Republic of China. The concern is that that donation was meant to buy influence and access with the incoming Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. But to hear it from Alexandre Trudeau, no, this was money solely for scholarship, and that never entered the picture. What do you say to that?
Well, the money was for scholarships, and yes, the money was for a bust of Mr. Trudeau, the senior, and it was for money for the University of Montreal. All those things were laid out. The Trudeau Foundation actually never ended up spending the money, which is a bit puzzling in this, and then they've given most of it back. So it's hard for us to divine the intentions of the donors, except what they said, which was to you know, give money in the name of Mr. Trudeau and to celebrate his connection to building ties with China. But even back when this was announced back in 2016, it was very clear this was a Chinese soft power effort. It was a Chinese government-backed organization which was really attempting to sort of, you know, build up Chinese influence and reputation. It was only this year that we learned, in fact, there was more to it. And as we reported, that the Chinese state had effectively said they would reimburse the donors for the money.
Mm-hmm. Now, you know, we did hear from Maurice Rosenberg yesterday, of course, past CEO of the Trudeau Foundation. And he admitted to a level of naivete, because he says in accepting this money from the donors, he was or believed that they were engaging in some type of soft diplomacy, that by being involved with Chinese donors and the donors seeing what the money was being used for here in Canada, it might foster a greater sense of academic freedom, a greater sense of democracy. And today was interesting to hear Mr. Trudeau essentially express his own doubts when it comes to academic diplomacy. Did that strike you at all?
Yeah, he said that we don't think it's changing China. That's what if I take from what he said today. His testimony is still unfolding as we talk, but the idea was, I don't think it's working, right? We're not changing China.
So it's interesting to, and also, you know, of course, what we feel of China now officially as policy with the Asia-Pacific strategy. You know, as you say, Mr. Trudeau came up here. He answered a lot of questions, not really focused on any one. So I'm wondering, from you, as one that has covered this story from the get-go and have broken so many stories, what questions do you still want Alexandre Trudeau to answer regarding those donations?
You know, did they do their due diligence on the donors? Did they actually make sure that they knew where the money was coming from? He seems to be unconcerned about the fact that a Chinese industry association was basically instructing the foundation, as we've reported, and Ms. Fournier has told the MPs last week, was instructing them on where to send the tax receipt, how to fill out the tax receipt, and the receipts were going back to China, and they were being made through a company which is affiliated with this Chinese industry association. So I think, why didn't you conduct more due diligence on where the actual source of the money is coming from? Because he seems to accept the fact it came from these men and not, in fact, from the Chinese government. So I'm still a bit skeptical on that.
Well, certainly not the end of the story. Stephen, really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And that's Stephen Chase with the Globe and Mail.